Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on a very busy, sorry, for the technical difficulties. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'm Lena. I'm the Vice Chair of the PRCA APAC Tech Group, alongside with quite a few of my colleagues here who are volunteers, as well as Tara, who is part of the PRCA APAC group. So we are really pleased to have you here today to talk about tech careers and navigating this whole landscape in PR and technology. So we've got an esteemed lineup of speakers over here. So we've got Puneet, who is our APJC head of comms at Cisco. We've got Carol, head of comms at Zendesk APAC. We've got Jin Lee, who some of you might know from our PR pitch days. And now he's started his own PR agency, Glue. Welcome, Jin Lee. And of course, to balance things off, we've got to have a journalist on the panel, and we've got Grace from Channel Asia. So I'll leave you over in their good hands, starting with Grace, who's going to be helping us to moderate the whole panel.
So the idea is 5 minutes of questions, and the rest we all pitch to you.
Sure.
Welcome to a room full of PR people.
Actually, it's funny that you say that because I was 2 years in public service comms. So I have been on the other side before. And so just now, Carolyn, you were asking me if I would ever go back into PR or comms, and I said no.
Yeah. Oh, she said no.
Great.
Like, and how she said no. No.
Not even agency, because I don't want to work with journalists. That's my only reason. Yeah. But anyway, yes, thank you so much for being here. I was doing like a little bit of research on you guys, LinkedIn and all that, and you guys have extensively diverse backgrounds for your current role. Why don't you start with telling me, how you entered tech PR, what drew you here? And I know for Puneet and Jin Lee, you guys are journalists or were journalists as well. Why don't you give like a 5-minute or 10-minute introduction to your career?
Okay. 10 minutes. Okay. I'll keep it short. Okay, so I started my career as a lawyer. So I started as a lawyer. I did that for about 4 years. Unfortunately, I was Malaysian and had no contacts here. And I was an average student. That means when you graduate from law school, you do litigation. Litigation means you just do champalang lah, rojak. Those people with the good scores and whose dad knows the founder, Ellen Gladhill, Drew and Napier, they will do corporate work. Okay, so litigation means I represented petty criminals, abused wives. I used to buy pirated software from this shop at People's Park Complex. He became my client. So I did whatever you can imagine, right? So I was most well known in law school as the guy in the law library that can give you the DOS diskette so that you can play your games. Because those days, there was no hard disk. That was my claim to fame, right? So out of law school, I go into the real world, and I literally was thrown in the deep end. Because now I got to look like I know my stuff, and you cannot say that you don't know, because this guy's life is depending on you, right? Yeah. So I did that 4 years. Then I went to lecture about 3 years in the local poly. I was teaching legal studies. But I really, really love video games. And I really, really love computers. But nobody wanted me. Nobody wanted to hire a litigation lawyer to be their in-house counsel, right? None of the tech companies wanted it. So then one day I saw an ad in the papers. It actually was Project Eyeball. I don't know who remembers this.
I do.
You do? Project Eyeball was looking for a tech journalist. I had no idea what it was. I had no friends in the media except Wee Boon, who's now the Invest editor, because he too was a lawyer and we were classmates, right? So I applied and they called me and they said, Jin, you're too young. Project Eyeball, we're looking for young people with a lot of energy. I said, but I'm 31. No, you're too old. I said, oh, okay, but I really want to do this, So I ended up in this thing called Tech and Science. So then they have started a desk called Tech and Science. Straits Times, I got in, and the rest is kind of history, right? So 15 years of that. To run this thing called These days when I meet the younger folks, a lot of them look at me like, what's that?
Yeah.
But a long time ago, we were the VJ and I may not agree lah, but we were the top dog then lah. Okay, of anything around what phone should you buy, what laptop should you choose. We even covered Cisco extensively. You know, William Uy, I don't know whether you know William Uy, would come to the office regularly, right? So anyway, that publication died the year I left. So
Because you left.
No, it was coincidental.
Okay.
So how did I get started, right? So what happened was I had been thinking about leaving about 2014, 2015. And I did feel that a lot of the PR work that was done, there was a lot of laugh. And not many, there were not many good PR people around. There were good ones, you know, like Caroline and Maureen and Meda, you know, people I remember from long ago. That means they're good, right? Nicholas, you know, yeah. So Lina, yeah. So I mean, I met Lina when she was pitching for Microsoft. I still remember she was new. So the truth is, I felt, you know, me through my rose-tinted glasses, thinking that PR is not that difficult. Really, how difficult can it be, right? Just pitching stories. So I literally went to a few clients and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to start an agency. I think I can do better than your PR agency. And I actually convinced 3 of them to give me a retainer. And that's how we started. And here I am 9 years later. I'm not sure what I was doing.
What about you, Caroline?
I can like cut 5 minutes of my intro because I was a lawyer who was in litigation, was a mediocre student, right? I got stuck with the criminal work, the divorce work, all of it. So thanks, Jinli. Yeah. But so I had literally come off like 3 very challenging cases that obviously I was supporting on. I wasn't anywhere senior enough to do to lead them myself, but that included a capital punishment trial, you know, where we were appealing against a death sentence. And so these were all very emotionally draining. And I was manifesting everything they tell you that you have when you are not happy in your job, right? So I finally one day very instinctively told somebody that, because they were like, oh, you're a lawyer. And I was like, yeah, just hopefully not for much longer. And the whole conversation was very instinctive. I hadn't really thought about it at this point. And then they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to write. And then they said, well, we're looking for a writer. And it was a tech company in Singapore, a startup that was building social networks before social networks were a thing and before any of the infrastructure existed to make social networks grow to what they are now. But they needed somebody to create content for each of the users. And so basically it was a situation where, you know, they wanted somebody, so just stop me if any of this sounds familiar. Okay, so you log in, you have your own page, right? You can leave things on your page that other people can see, you know, like stuff like that. So yeah, no, it was a local startup. It was called Earth9, and when Facebook came along, remember Earth9?
Aaron, yeah.
Yeah, so Chisim, yeah. When Facebook came along, it truly broke my heart because I had seen this being done in Singapore years before, and you know, I don't know how Chisim wakes up every day knowing he had an idea that, you know, was just so ahead of its time. But yeah, so I was working for them as a writer when the CMO came to me one day and said, hey, Carol, I need someone to help me with PR. And, you know, I just feel like this is something that you might be a natural at. So I said, tell me what it is you think you want me to learn to do. And I suffer from the most extreme FOMO of anybody you'll ever meet. Like, so I'm like, I'm down, let's do this, right? Teach me. So he taught me the ropes of media relations to begin with. And so writing press releases was not a problem for me and all of that. And I was doing this for about 9 months when a friend of mine who I didn't know had also left law to go into comms was looking to set up a team of tech, you know, specialists. And he asked the journos, he said, who do you like working with? And they're like, there's this girl, she's new, but we like working with her. And he's like, wait, I went to law school with her. Isn't she a lawyer? And so he called me. And then that was the point at which I realized I was never going back to the law because I left that job and I went to a PR job. And having the conversation with my parents about it, you know, was was like, I have this job opportunity and it's in a PR agency. And they were like, okay. And, you know, you have to understand that my parents sent me to law school in England at a time when the Singapore dollar was 3.75 to the pound, okay? That's an expensive education that I was about to turn my back on. And they very kindly said, do what makes you happy. And so I then went on after that PR agency, to work in-house at a law firm for 5 years as their comms manager, the Singapore's oldest law firm, Rodike, and then after that, into tech PR. I went back to tech PR because I missed that so much, and we can dig into the appeal of tech PR later. But basically, that's kind of what led me here. And I found that wherever else I went in PR, and I've done consumer, I've done healthcare, all of it, my heart always took me back to tech. And, you know, I just always wanted to go back to tech. And so 3 years ago, I made the decision to go in-house because I had an amazing opportunity ahead of me with Zendesk. And, you know, the way that Puneet will talk about Cisco, like as one of the best places he's ever worked, like Zendesk, I'm truly grateful every day that that, you know, whatever forces in this universe led me there. So.
Awesome. I don't know where to start.
You're a lawyer?
No.
No.
He said he's a lawyer. Lawyer by qualification, lawyer by qualification. Mediocre student. I didn't even make it to law school. That should tell you how bad I was, right? They've set the bar really high, but no, jokes apart. I think like most people in the industry, it's just a very varied background. I studied to manage hotels. I grew up in India, and I went back to my hometown, really small town up in the mountains, and I was running a cafe. Pretty successful one. We used to be one of the most popular ones. And then one fine day, sitting having breakfast with my mom and dad, and ESPN Star Sports ran a front page ad in every newspaper in the country saying the dream job contest. They were looking for a new TV presenter to present cricket. Like a billion cricket mad Indians, I just simply remarked, said, this is really a dream job. You get to travel the world, you get paid to watch cricket and talk about it. So my mom said, go for it. I'm like, are you crazy? She's like, you have your own cafe. You've got nothing to lose. Just go for it. And before I knew it, I ended up being the All India runner-up, which actually brought me to Singapore to actually get me a job here. Fast forward, worked in radio, TV, opportunity at BBC came along. Some kind soul introduced me. And then I worked at BBC for 5 or 6 years. And just like you, an unplanned conversation landed me into communications. I was looking to do something different in BBC. I wanted to write features. So they were like, come to the UK. I'm like, no, this is home. I love Singapore. I'm going to live here. They're like, okay, then you decide what you need to do. There was someone I used to interview for my stories. I used to write a lot in tech and business and economics. I was having coffee with him and their new marketing leader. So I was to the other side. The PR person was trying to ask me how many stories I'm going to write with them, so on and so forth. And for some reason, conversation went into career growth. And she asked me, so how long have you been with BBC? I'm like, 6 years. So what, are you looking to change? I said, yeah, I want to do something different, but I don't want to go to the UK. So what's next? I said, I don't know. I know one thing, I can't work for another news organization. I would love to try my hand at comms or PR, but all the agencies I've spoken to either want to pay me less, or they say, yeah, you know how to write stories, but you don't know how to service clients. And they want to give me targets. So I'm not stupid. I don't want to take the same money and have more pressure. And I said it as a joke. And I said, at this rate, if I had to do this, I might just do my own. And she's like, what's stopping you? I'm like, I don't have a client. She said, we'll sign up. We're looking for someone. I thought she was joking. 3 days later, she pings me saying, can I have your ACRA number? I didn't even know what is ACRA. I know what is ACRA number. She said, you have not registered your company. I've got a vendor document waiting for you. And then I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I, just like you, set up. God bless them. They got me my second client. They got me my third client and my fourth client. But all the work was get me into Straits Times, get me into BBC. Media pitching is amazing. I know it's bread and butter, but it's one small part of what we do in communications. And I was like, I want to do something more. So my former editor at BBC had left the BBC as well, and he'd become a partner at a really large PR firm. And he was visiting, so I had breakfast with him. And he's like, how's life, Mr. Singh? I'm like, Ben, life's good. Is PR treating you well? I said, financially, yes, better than BBC. He says, I can see a big but coming. I'm like, but there's no strategic work. Like, I could do this in my sleep, write op-eds, write pitch notes. He's like, dude, you got to join a bigger company to do strategic work. No one's giving it to you as a one-man army. I'm like, so what do? He says, come join us. Become a partner. We're looking for one. So I took my business. I went to them, became a partner. My first client followed. All the clients followed. First one stayed throughout. And the same person who got me into comms left that company and joined Cisco. Naveen, you know. So Naveen then called me and said, we need to have lunch. Agency pangs, new client, new client, new client. So I meet him for lunch. I'm like, Naveen, what can I help you with? And he said, you can help me with resigning. I'm like, what? He's like, I want you to leave your job and I want you to come work with me. And I went to run comms. I had no idea what Cisco did at that. I had to Google what's the difference between a router and a switch. And then I went to do ASEAN comms, and then since then running it Asia. So just like you, an unplanned conversation has landed me.
I realize I know Naveen from
Do you know
school.
Naveen?
Yeah, yeah, we were.
He's still with Cisco,
Oh, okay.
but now based out of Europe. So he's doing something different.
So, I mean, when I was asked to moderate this, I was given a whole list of questions to possibly ask you guys. But as a journalist, I don't follow talking points. And so we will just dive in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after.
It's good, but I didn't prepare any answers.
Good. Yeah. Okay, so we're here today to talk about tech PR specifically. So not any other aspect of PR, but I think you guys have also dabbled in other areas of PR, especially with your in-house, with your agency experience. I want to know, what are the specific skills that tech PR looks for that maybe other areas of PR may not, or it's not as crucial? Yeah, aside from product knowledge of the tech industry. People who are aspiring to get into tech PR, what would be some, like, it's characteristics or personality types that you would look for?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think for me, the impact narrative with tech, I think, goes so much wider, because you can connect it to policy, you can connect it to macroeconomics, you can connect it to society. And when we started to see the shift in the way storytelling was happening, it was actually Cisco that was a little bit of an inspiration for me when they were a client. They were the pioneers with the newsroom, because they were, and I think they called it the Nexus for a while or something, but they were the pioneers of the corporate newsroom. And where you could go in and you could search for articles that they were putting out themselves. And we now talk about the brand as a publisher. But one of the articles that I remember reading was about how they enabled cashless payments for coffee farmers in Brazil. And it was a human story. It wasn't a tech story. And so for me, when I think about what distinguishes tech, I think the ability to take that story and connect it to just about anything macro, political, economic, social, anything. It's in everything we do. And so to find that is the craft, and to find that is the joy of doing tech PR as well.
Yeah, the question was, what do you look for?
Yeah,
Yeah.
specifically for tech.
Actually, I am looking for new people.
Mm.
My standards are quite low these days.
Why these
I'm
days?
looking for
What-
people. I'm looking for people with good attitude. I don't think you really need to have tech knowledge, right? You need to have attitude to learn, right? In anything, yeah. You see, tech. Sometimes we put tech in a very high pedestal, right? So I can give you an example. Like this morning, we had a new client, AXS. You know people who drive, and when you're at the exit and there's no money in your cash card, or your IU is not working, bad things happen to you, right? You can't leave and you're stuck there. You can curse all the vulgarities you know, but the gantry isn't going to open. So what AXS did was they did a very simple solution. Now you just need to download the app, key in your car plate, key in your credit card. At the participating car parks, at the exit, they recognize your car, the gantry opens. You're paying this through the credit card. So I told you the story. You don't need to have tech background. You just need to have a simple understanding about how things work and the ability to tell this in a simple way to the journalists. Because most journalists have no idea what is a router or switch. They might know who is Cisco today, right? Yeah. So when you talk about tech journalists, they largely don't exist in Singapore, right? I think for Cisco, Zendesk, they're talking to my old friends, people like Victor, Aaron, the remnants of B2B tech.
Yeah.
Maureen's smiling, she knows them, right? The remnants of B2B tech, which you can count with less than 10 fingers. Okay. Now, when you go into general newsroom, CNA, Straits Times, other than Irene Tam, who's my successor, most people don't know what you're talking about, right? So you don't really need to have tech knowledge. And I'm not looking for that when I'm hiring, okay? I say myself quite low because it's been really hard to hire good people in Singapore. But if I could choose, I think someone to do tech PR with someone who is curious, okay? I'm the kind of agency that half the clients hate me and half the clients love me. I may not be your typical Morinos lah. Okay. I'm not your typical service the client kind of person, right? Yeah, I think it's because I used to be a journalist and I used to be a lawyer, so it is bad for me, but it's also good for me, right? So clients that have very good stories. So I used to do this work for NUS, National University of Singapore, right? My old friend Fan Yip didn't have staff. She said, Jean, my staff all resigned. How? Can you help me for 6 months? So Glue went on retainer with NUS for 6 months. She said, here are the 10 in 6 months projects for you. She threw me 10 folders. Each folder was some invention that the researcher had published in some journal, which no human being can understand. Okay, so nothing to do with tech. It's nothing to do with tech. It is cancer markers. This guy developed something in the ECM, and ECM is like this thing between your bloods. I can't remember now, right? But my headline was NUS scientist develops breakthrough in cancer. You don't go around pitching to the journalist. He developed a TMI panel of 29 genes that can help you reduce, right? But in your story, you have to say that. Because you cannot just say he developed a breakthrough in cancer. Okay. So if I can learn about science, which I know nothing about, anybody learn about tech. So you don't need to hire people who knows tech, but you need to hire people. Again, if I could choose, I know nobody wants for Glue because we're very small. Yeah. But if I could choose, I would hire people with great curiosity and great resilience, because you have to keep figuring out how it can work. And if you can't figure it out, how can you explain to the Aaron Tans and the Irene Tams of the world, right? They will look down on you and they will never listen to you again. that was what I used to be when I was a journalist.
Actually, yeah, to your point, right? I realized that the best PR accounts people are those who can explain things super simply. So when I read a press release, sometimes I'm like, I don't even think you understand what you're writing. Yeah, because it's so complicated and there's still so much jargon involved. Yeah. And I think those type of press releases tend to come from technical experts or like people who are very high level, with very high level of knowledge. So people who are teaching themselves as they write, I think it's obvious when they pitch to you that, okay, I'm just telling you this as a friend, like a coffee conversation. Yeah. Very rare though.
There's a, yeah.
Yeah.
I think those come from companies where communications people don't have a seat on the table.
Mm.
If you've earned your seat on the table and you can explain to the stakeholders why the release needs to be written in a certain way, you will see releases that are very differently written. But you have to earn it.
Yeah.
The business stakeholder needs, you need to deliver things to earn it.
Mm.
But back to your question, slightly different when you're working in-house, I think, than compared to when you're working at the agency, because the stakes are different. When you're at the agency side, yes, you're the partner to the in-house team, but at the end of the day, you are the arms and legs that helping them execute on one particular thing, and that particular thing is driving earned media coverage. 90% of the job from the agencies for the in-house people is that. But when you're hiring talent for in-house, I think the skills you're looking for, that I look for when we are hiring people, I agree with both. It's less about, do you know how to write a press release?
Mm.
Do you know how to write a briefing book? All those things are not rocket science. You can teach them. And honestly speaking, give it 2 more years, you won't even need to teach them.
Mm.
They will be auto-populated, auto-built with an AI engine that every company will have, right? You will literally just say, build a briefing book. Dave West, APJC CEO, is speaking to Grace at MediaCorp. She wants to talk to him about cybersecurity, Cisco's products. She wants to understand about role of AI in security, role of security in AI, and the evolution of cyber attacks. And the engine will populate a briefing book and give you the messaging. So you don't even need to teach that, right? What I look for, and I think most in-house people would kind of look for, I think, is one, the understanding of what's happening in the technology world. So you don't need to know exactly how a firewall works or how email security works. But if you don't understand what's going on in the cybersecurity world and you're applying for a job at a cybersecurity company and you don't know what is phishing or spamming, it's not a great place to start, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think for in-house, very, very important understanding of the socio-economic and geopolitical developments across the world. These are the questions I ask everyone I interview. There's not a trick question. I ask them to give me 3 socio-economic trends and 3 geopolitical trends that they see that will have an impact on the country that they are based in. If you don't know, then you can't do what she just said. You can't humanize the story. What are you going to humanize it with if you actually don't even know what's going on? So those 2, I think, are the kind of skills we look for, because when you are in-house, I spend, honestly, no more than 15% of my time on the media side of comms. 85% of the work is building strategy, building ideas, handling crises that never see the light of the day, advising spokespeople on what they should say. We were just invited to an event in Hiroshima where we had to talk about ethical AI. If you don't know AI, if you don't understand concept of bias in data and algorithms, and if you don't understand how algorithms work and how AI works and what are the issues around ethics, how are you going to write that speech? Right. So those are the kind of skills. Rest, everything can be taught. I mean, I don't want to undermine the jobs we do, but it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
I'm a bit mindful of time. So before we go to the audience Q&A, maybe just one question to round up this panel discussion. So before you entered tech PR, I don't know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, if you could look back on your career, what is one thing you wish your younger self would have known? Or you wish you could tell that younger self of yours before they even entered or knew about tech PR?
Don't do it.
Okay, that's it. That's a wrap.
That is end of story.
End of Zoom.
Yeah, it's interesting because like for me, I think a lot of people would assume that I would go back and make the decision to maybe not go to law school, right? I had from the time I was 5, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer because I've been told I was argumentative. So I was like, right, I'll make a career of this then, right? So then I used to watch all these legal TV shows and all of that. So people assume sort of 20 years on in a PR career that, you know, oh, well, that's probably the decision you would, you know, rethink. It's not. So I feel like one of the best things about tech PR is that a lawyer can be where I am today with my career. The Sumin, who's the head of comms at Grab, is a trained engineer, right? She was, you know, she was in my team when she was an account executive, right? I think tech PR is quite welcoming that way because of the fact that we engage with all of it. So it's, you know, like I said, I have extreme FOMO, so I regret very little in my life. So there's nothing I would go back and do differently. I think what I would say is that I would say just take, and I say this about anything, is like, everything about who you are makes you a great communicator, right? So when people ask me like why I'm a great communicator, or why I can do my job well, my youngest godson is doing PSLE this year, God help me, I have to tutor him. Eldest godson is about to come to NUS on an exchange for law school, right? So that I can mediate between the 8 godchildren I have in that age range makes me a great communicator, right? So I just think like if there was anything, if I look back on my life, and I would just say it's take everything about who you are and put it into your craft.
If you're not comfortable being uncomfortable,
Mm.
don't do tech PR.
Nice.
The pace.
Oh.
Do you
Many
regret your?
of my journalist friends have asked me, Jin, should I do PR?
Oh,
I
okay.
said, don't.
What is the reason you usually give them?
Because they don't know the hell they're going to go into.
It's true.
Then y'all can y'all then tell the journalists to be kinder to us? Now that you're on the other side.
But most of the journalists are very kind to me.
I actually disagree.
Hmm.
I genuinely think it is probably the best job you can have.
Yeah.
There is not any other function in a large corporation that has visibility into what is going on in a company than communications people.
Mm.
The legal people will only know what they need to look at.
Yeah.
Yes, they know and they keep things under the wraps because that's the job. The HR division, the head of HR knows mostly what's going on, but the people below usually are focused on what's going on in HR. Anything that ever happens in Cisco, the first call that happens in Cisco is to the comms person. I am usually the first one in the meeting saying, God, we need to do this, or God, this has happened, what do we do? There is no other function that gets the level of visibility that you get into what's going on in a company.
Mm.
And if you earn your seat on the table,
Mm.
I know I'm repeating that you have to earn the seat on the
Yeah.
table. It's not given to you as comms person. You have to deliver. If you earn the seat on the table, you can actually influence things right to the level of the CEO. Like we in Cisco Comms literally drive strategy on what we are going to say in areas that are of biggest importance in the company right now.
I think that also speaks to Cisco's culture though, because I don't think every company
No, not every company
puts
has.
comms,
Yeah.
as a business
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think that the way that comms is being understood more broadly, just, you know, through either very large scale crises, unfortunately. Take the Delta, the Delta incident. there was literally a map that like the first statement that was put out, which was 100% written by the lawyers, and their stock price just plummeted, right? And then they got the comms people involved, and they wrote a much more human statement, and things started to recover, right? I mean, one of my funniest memories was a client calling me at 8 o'clock just as I was leaving the office, and she was like, Carol, this thing's happened. We're gonna need a holding statement. I was like, oh, sure. So I wrote it, I sent it to her, and she didn't know my background. So then she said, could you just stay at your desk? And I was like, because I said to, could you just call me if you need anything else. She's like, can you stay at desk because legal will have changes? And I'm like, I think they will, but I was like, never mind. So then she said, legal always has changes. I was like, okay. She called me back 5 minutes later. She's like, legal wants to know who wrote this.
Well done.
Wow, nice.
So more dangerous than the comms person in the room is the legally trained comms person. So yeah, and I was like, tell them a legal person wrote it. Wow, I got so much like freedom
Nice.
after that because they were just like, it's fine, Carol knows what she's doing, it's okay. But yeah, so I think, and I see the reassurance even with my stakeholders sometimes, you know, like I'm just, hey, I'm legally like Tom, our CEO, he's a lawyer by training. So when I first met Tom, I was like, hey, Tom, and we jammed on that, and he just exhaled immediately. He's like, that's fine, my common person thinks this way, it's all good, you know? So yeah.
I think that goes back to your point about how you don't regret law school, because everything has a point, essentially.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, we'll open up the floor to questions. You guys are comms people.
Hey guys, hi. Spoken. This is Akash here from Precious Comms. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. I think one thing that I think all of us realize in tech we are right on a day-to-day basis is that we have to work on simplifying the complex, right, on a day-to-day basis. So I would love if you all to share some insights on how you do that, because I mean I know it's not really related to the topic at hand, but I mean I have a very different perspective. I have two people on the comms side, I have an agency and I have a journalist. So I would love to really pick your brains on how you go about doing that. Thank you so much.
How to simplify
Simplify.
things.
Yeah.
Oh. So when I talk to my new staff, right, I always say a good story always starts with a problem. Okay, so there's actually a technique in this. If you cannot tell me what the problem is, there's no story. Okay, so I'll go to the client. I said, whatever you're launching, it's the problem. What are you trying to solve? Yeah. Now, if you can define the problem, you can define the solution. Yeah. If they cannot explain to you, it means there's no story. If I sit down with the client, and usually with the clients, and I do get a seat at the table with my clients, because I said, I don't understand what you're telling me, and I don't understand what the guy you asked to talk to me is telling me. I need to pitch to the Irene Tams and Aaron Tans of the world. If I can't explain to that in 1 minute, they're not going to come for your event, right? So I force it on my clients. Okay, so the type of clients where the comms person does not have a seat at the table struggles with me because she's there to protect her job. It's so scared for me to meet people that can tell me what it is, and I can't do my job. If I had people like Puneet who has a seat at the table, right, and he can solve all that for me, I can help the client. But actually, everything can be explained. If I can explain tumor matrisome index with the 29 gene panel and get it covered in the Straits Times, I am very confident everything can be explained. Yeah. You can explain, you can make something that's complex that has meat simple. What you cannot do is you cannot create something from nothing. That's the difference. Yeah.
For me, I think there was if I think about it in the tech context, right? One of the key learnings for me was understanding the buyer mindset and understanding that in tech you have 3 buyers, you have the user buyer, the technical buyer, and the executive buyer. And how each of these people think about the technology and how it's going to work in the organization, and understanding then whose mindset am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the mindset of the user buyer who just wants to know if this is easy? Who am I speaking to the mindset of the technical buyer who wants to understand how much downtime is gonna, this is gonna impact my stack, how, and things like that? Am I speaking to an executive buyer who is largely risk averse, only cares about the profit, the profits and the efficiency? So what mindset am I speaking to, first of all? Therefore, before you break down the value proposition. The second big learning for me around how to frame the value proposition came from me getting to hear this lady speak. Her name's Nancy Giordano. She was one of the early curators of TED, and she's amazing. And I heard her speak at and she talked about USP, reframing what USP is, not to your unique selling proposition, but your unique social purpose. What are you in this world to do, right? So yeah, you're building this, but what is this enabling, right? So reframing those narratives in the context of what are you in this world to do? What are you in this world to enable? What are you in this world to create, right? So those two things together for me then help me think about a lens through which I'm not talking about speeds and feeds, but I'm talking about the impact of the technology.
May I agree? I think it's tough to do sometimes, but one thing that really helps is detaching yourself from the brand. So you got to think of it in two ways. There are two key things that will drive what we do for a living. And I'm thinking just pure PR lens, not crisis, not anything else. There's the products. Three things. There's the product. If you're a public listed company, then it's your earnings. And then there is everything else. You don't really have much of a say in a product because whether you like it or not, the specifications matter because the product is being built for the customer, not for the journalist, right? If no one's buying it, you can keep writing about it. It's a failure, right? It's the earnings are factual. You made X, profit is X. You can't change them. If you're a listed company, whatever you report to the exchange is what you got to send to the media. You can't add a single word, right? It's the third pillar that everything else you do around content, around thought leadership, around research, around whatever else you might build. At that place is where I think if you detach yourself and say, I want to build something on AI or on cybersecurity or on future of work. It has to be related to what Cisco does primarily because Cisco pays the money, but it can't just be about Cisco. Because when you create that, then you have a Grace interested, then you have an Irene interested, and then you can tell them. I'll give you just an example. AI is a big focus for us. So we built an AI readiness index last year in November. We built it out of Singapore. It was our team's idea. We benchmarked companies across 30 markets in the world. Are companies even ready to adopt and deploy AI? Leave aside leveraging the impact. Things we measured them on, which has got nothing to do with Cisco: strategy, culture, governance and ethics, talent. We are not a consulting company. We don't do strategy. We are not a HR company. We don't provide talent. We're not a change management company. We don't do change management. And then we added infrastructure and data, the two things that are our pillars. Okay. So we did a whole piece, which was outside of Cisco. And then we extracted the infrastructure and data, and we gave it to our business who then used it with the customers. Right? So you have to detach sometimes and say, this is not about Cisco. This is about big picture thinking. Not always easy to do. It's a battle every day, but that's the job in-house. You have to fight those battles and convince the stakeholders that you have to invest the money and get this done.
Hi, hello, yeah, this is Dini from Radio. Just now you were speaking about humanizing stories, right? But my question is that in tech, especially in PR, tech PR, there's always that narrative about tech for good, tech for good. But how then, what are the telltale signs of a story that is actually humanized? I'll give you an example, like maybe let's say 2 years ago, metaverse was a thing, and then we humanized it. But then now looking at it, it's nothing. So how do we then avoid humanizing the wrong tech for good stories? Or like what are the factors that as a comms professional we need to look for when we humanize this messaging?
What was it? They said 2 years ago. What was it?
Metaverse.
You know, like how
Metaverse.
Oh, metaverse.
So how then do we avoid humanizing the wrong stories in PR, tech PR especially?
You need to tell the client when he's giving you fluff. So the problem with our business is we are thinking of making money. Okay. Right? So if the client comes to you and he says, hey, you know what, I've got $20,000. I want you to push this up for me. Okay, difference, I'm the boss. Most of us are not in a situation, right? Even if you're the MD, you have to give work done to you, right? So it's easy for me to say this. The problem really comes when you accept fluff from your client and you expected to deliver result, because there's no way. There's no way you can squeeze blood from stone. Trust me, I've tried. It doesn't work, right? And I have actually resigned from many accounts that have been in that situation because you have to survive. So you take in work, right? And then you realize that it is better you stop wasting time to do this kind of clients and look for the clients that have real stories to tell. But that's me, not everyone else. Yeah. So metaverse, because I used to be a tech journalist, whenever people tell me metaverse, I laugh because there was this thing called Second Life. People remember Second Life. Remember there was no life. We were in Second Life lying around, nothing to do, right? And then I say metaverse, like, do you even know what metaverse is, right? So it's hard on the PR agencies, right? When your boss says, hey, this guy just gave us $100,000 to talk about metaverse. But what about metaverse you want to talk about? You know, so I'm not sure what you mean by tech for good, because that also sounds like fluff. Yeah, I would never sell a fluff story. So don't jump into the bandwagon of this fluff thing, because you've been long enough in tech media, tech journalism, or tech PR, you know there are a lot of things come and go, right? So not long ago there was ESG, now they say greenwashing. Not long ago there was AI, now they're saying AI washing. It's the same, because if you study there are these charts about how when startups launch, they have this growth cycle and then the peak cycle and whatever. So when things are starting, there's always a lot of PR push, a lot of excitement, a lot of talk, right? But you have to be careful, because if as a PR, whether we are comms professional or agency, if the journalist sees us as fluffing things, it's like the boy who cried wolf, right? Every time, yeah. So we actually tell clients, my agency's brand is on record if I spam fluff for you. So no, I won't do it for you. But not many people have, I guess, I don't earn a lot of money, right? You can tell, but not many people are willing to do this, right? Because if you have a big agency of 20 people, 30 people, the truth is you have to keep the lights on, right? You have to take the business. It's easier said than done, what I do, right? That's why I'm still not that rich. But I mean, I said don't do it, but actually I do enjoy my job. I enjoy my job a lot because I deal with a lot of different types of people. You know, if I had stayed in media, I would not have experienced all these weird clients with all this weird stuff, all this politics going on, which is interesting for me, right? Sometimes I've done a lot of crazy things. You know, I jump over comms manager, talk to the CEO. Sometimes I win the battle, sometimes I lose the client. So I'm sometimes not I'm probably not the person asked for advice. You know what I mean? Yeah, because I do things my way, you see. And sometimes that way does not mean the best way when it comes to business. You know, yeah. But I do have certain principles. Yeah. So try not to fall into the fluff thing. Yeah, go deep into what is this really metaverse. Okay, so we know metaverse is not going to change the world, maybe, right? But there must be something there that's newsy, right? So look for those things. Yeah.
I agree. No, 100% agree. I think it's to both. It's to in-house communications as well as to agency partners to understand, is it really for good? And is the impact really quantifiable? So metaverse, key example, it was a trend that didn't even see light of the day. How can you humanize it? It's not even mainstream. It's like saying hybrid work in 2023 changed the world. Yeah, it changed the world, but you can't humanize it yet, right? But if something has been in existence for 10, 15 years, so think of a large country like Philippines, China, Indonesia, India. People find it hard to believe there were parts of India till about 5 years ago where there was no electricity in certain villages. There's no broadband. In a country of that size, you can't take fiber optics everywhere. But if you take Wi-Fi and if you can provide connectivity to people in extremely rural populations and start providing education. But that story is not a story to be told when the Wi-Fi has been deployed. It's a story that will be told 5 years later. How many kids got education? How many got into the college? What impact does it have? So I 100% agree. I think people should ask the question, how have you quantified it? And what's it? I think as comms people, we should do sometimes what journalists do and ask our stakeholders, what is the proof we have to take this story to someone? Because yes, it is your reputation at stake. When you pitch something that doesn't make any sense, and a journalist calls you back and you say, I can't back this up, it's a slippery slope that you cannot recover from.
I spent a good number of years at Wagner Edstrom and now We Communications. Pam Edstrom was very clear with, like, it was just, it just came down through the whole organization. We're not here to solve comms problems, we're here to solve business problems. So she says, the best comms people are the people who can solve business problems. So the question you're always asking back is, what is the business problem? And yes, a lot of tech companies did this thing where we need a CSR program or we need something that shows that we're doing good in the world and all that. So we just kind of did things, because they had to be done. So the best thing that we can do as comms people is when those things come to us is to call it out and to say, what is the real impact of this? Because that may force the business to go back and think about it. Can I take 1 minute to tell you guys about a campaign which was really just from thin air, right? But ended up being so impactful. So Unilever was a client of ours, and one of the brand managers had he linked a sponsorship with an F1 team, and Unilever being the USLP people, the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan people, and Paul Polson being so huge on reducing the environmental impact plus F1, not quite a good happy mix there. So we got called in about a month before the Singapore Grand Prix. We need to kind of atone for this. We need to do something to mitigate what we've done here. What can we do? And typically my team, when there's an F1 project, gets super excited because I'll be like, guys, we have an F1 project. Everyone's spilled into the room. I call, get pizza in, we brainstorm, everyone gets excited. So this time we got the pizza and everyone sat down and I was like, okay, so here's the deal. Clear Shampoo have sponsored the Lotus F1 team. And we need to get them some positive noise at the Singapore Grand Prix. Literally, one of the guys was like, if I haven't eaten the pizza, can I leave now? They just didn't want any part of it, right? And so I was like, no, we're going to work through this, guys. And so in the end, we were like, what's Clear's brand proposition? It's about protecting your scalp. What's really important what's a really, really important issue and pressing issue in Asia, road safety. A lot of people can't afford helmets, right? So we basically then, and what we were given was not a great budget, and 20 minutes of Kimi Räikkönen's time and 1 hour with the rest of the team and access to some of the simulators. So we created a launch event of a global CSR program that was basically Kimi gets on stage, signs the helmets. We auction the helmets at the event. Kimi and the team, we auction those helmets. The money goes to a program being run by the UN that will then purchase and distribute helmets in underprivileged communities, right? That was a real rabbit out of the hat for us. But because we created a format that was so replicable, they did it at Sepang, they did it, I believe, in Sao Paulo, and also in Shanghai, and all in $150,000 worth of helmets in just one season was distributed to underprivileged communities across Asia, you know, and predominantly to children, where we also ran road safety education programs. That was something that in the end, you know, it started with one thing, but in the end, we ended up being able to do so much good from that little simple idea. So sometimes I think when we think there will be fads that come and go in tech, and there will always be this like, what can we, you know, what can we connect it to? The best thing you can do is connect it back to the business, because we were like, what is Clear's proposition, right? And we built it from that. And so it didn't feel unnatural, right? So I would say keep going back to what is the business objective and build that back into whatever you're doing.
I'll share from a journalist perspective. So the best PR/comms person I work with is not in tech, but I rarely work with tech PR or comms. So he's in transport actually, and it's Tower Transit's head of comms. So I love working with him because he thinks like a journalist essentially, and he is so excited about his stories when he pitches, and I can tell the difference because it's things that I can feel like, okay, he would share over lunch, that kind of thing. So it's like you have to be excited to spill the tea about your client, like, oh my God, I have this exciting new client and this is what is happening. And the journalist can feel that excitement also. Yeah. So I mean, if you just tell it like a regular pitch, I don't know, I just don't feel excited. There's no storytelling essentially.
100%. I think I've been a little bit in love with every one of my clients that I have worked with. Like, I think there's been a little piece of me that's just, you know, been in awe of what they do. And that's always made me quite, I think, you know, it comes through in the pitch. It comes through, I'm sure.
Yeah. And like for Tower Transit, because it's transport and you would think it's so boring, it's like a very boring thing, right? But he was able to humanize every pitch to me. And so there was this one specific pitch where he talked about how, you know, maybe we could do a story on the culture of first buses in the morning and how, you know, the first bus, you have mostly regular passengers because unless you have a fixed appointment, you're not going to take a 6 a.m. bus. And so because of this specific culture within a bus, there was this one incident where a bus driver noticed his regular passenger in the wheelchair bay had actually fainted or was just unconscious. And he knew that another regular passenger that he had, who sat on the upper deck, 2 seats behind the stairs, was a nurse. And so he got that specific passenger because he knew she was there, having seen her every day for the last like 2 years to help with this specific unconscious passenger. So it was this sort of thing that he was able to join the dots to make it a broader story rather than just bus driver does a good deed kind of angle. Yeah, so that was how he managed to tie it together, and he got me to speak to another bus driver also who had been driving for like a few decades. And the main proposition, like you said, the business proposition of Tower Transit, it's just humanizing transport essentially. I loved working with them. So even though I was in hard news for 3 years, struggled a little bit with like the complex things, but yeah, whenever I get a PR pitch that simplifies something so traditionally boring or dull or makes me so excited to work on a story I never ever thought I'd be excited to work on. Yeah, it's great. And you will remember that comms person forever. Yeah, and you build more than just a professional relationship, like you're actually bouncing ideas with them. Yeah, so that goes a long way.
Yeah. So I have this trick I can share. Sometimes you don't have much of an angle. Okay. So the trick is you can call the journalist and say, hey, you know what? I got this thing. What do you think? Yeah. So when the journalist says, why don't you do this? Say, okay, I'll do that. So if you're doing so mine more agency work, right? Not in-house. Agency work, we are very focused on how are you going to get that story, right? And that if you like that kind of practice, it's a bit like litigation. You're going to fight a case. You may win the case or you may lose the case. So that's why I choose this path. I probably can never do in-house work, right? Because I just want to get my story in the papers, just like you want to win the case. So there's a whole practice around that, you know, which comes from experience and doing, right? So I can give you an example. Just in today's papers, you read page 4 of the Straits Times. The story about Singapore is ahead of the 10 Gbps broadband. That story came from me because my client is ViewQuest. And they were 5th ISP to launch a 10 Gbps plan. Now, how do you pitch a story to mainstream media that this is the 5th 10 Gbps plan? Because nobody will write it. Is it the cheapest? No. Is it the fastest? No. So my pitch literally was, I called the journalist and I said, you know what? They're doing this lah. You know, I know it's the 5th one. What do you think? So we had the conversation, and then I said, you know, I read somewhere that the government said they want to have this by 2026 or something. But you know, I read that all 5 of them have already launched it, right? So why don't you do a story about how this government plan to go 10 GPS nationwide is happening faster than expected? Say, okay, let's do it. And they timed it with the launch of my client's product. So you can't teach these things. You know, it's a bit like you're going to the jungle and you're trying to shoot. I can't teach you this, right? You have to do it to learn, right? And that's why, even though I said don't do tech PR, because it's hard. What I do is really, really hard. A lot of my friends who are in journalism, they have a stable, comfortable life. I don't want them to take a chance they may regret. Because times today are not as good as before, right? But if you're willing, of course, it's very interesting. You know, so tech PR is really, actually it is interesting, but you really have to navigate so much things, right? And explain things that way. Yeah.
But Jinli brings up a very good point about storytelling and the craft of storytelling, right? And how we keep innovating that. And I think one of the things I used to do with my agency team when I was running an agency was we would regularly do exercises where we would take stories out of the paper and we'd reverse engineer them. So go all the way back to who pitched it, why did they pitch it, what would the pitch have looked like, right? So that we can break down, you know, like how this got to be successfully placed, right? And to think about how something goes from a pitch to print, essentially. And so I think that's a fun thing to kind of do. And the other thing that we would then do was also very deliberately work through story worksheets, right? What's the headline I want to see? What is the storyline I want to see in that story? What are the factors, what are the things that need to go into that to make it happen? And a very deliberate part of that is your dependencies, right? So if you're agency side and you're counseling a client, for example, I don't want to just see, for example, things like, yeah, we're going to target this journal, right? And I want you to come and tell me, Carol, you need to give me 15 minutes with Tom, and Tom needs to have all of this data, and we need to have a customer example for this to happen. Those dependencies, working through those dependencies in storytelling are very critical. And that only happens when you know the person you're pitching to, right? So with Jinli's team, when he was at Digital Life, we knew each of them and the kinds of stories they liked to tell, right? That's where your media relations comes into it. Because then you are not pitching Jinli, you're pitching Irene because she would rather tell that kind of a story, right?
Okay.
And you're not wasting Jinli's time by taking a story that he then has to go, actually, this time I'm going to talk to Irene, right? No. So knowing your media, and this is where, like, you know, the reading is so important. I tell you, the number of ACs and AEs who really struggled through media monitoring, but didn't realize that that's where the power is. I'm like, the power is in that report you send every day. You know exactly who's writing about what. And if we were sitting in a room with the client, you are more useful to them than I am as the AD of this account, because you can tell them, Irene wrote about this 3 months ago and she took this take on it. You want to talk about it from this perspective, and for that to happen. So I would say work through your storytelling and really deliberately think about what has value for the media and what has to get you there. For me, as on the client side now, that's the stuff that I'm always working through with my agencies. Tell me what you need to make the story happen, right? I will go and get that thing for you, right? So, and I don't know, Puneet, if that's the same experience for you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's the back to the same point, it's how do you make it relatable to
Mm.
the audience that the journalist is writing for, so. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one question from our audience
Mm.
online. Hope you can hear me if I'm asked. Plenty of young comms talent I interview usually say they prefer doing lifestyle or consumer comms. How can we convince more of them to give tech PR a chance?
Don't hire this person.
Just
Why waste time?
don't-
Why do we need to convince?
Yeah.
Why?
Is the
There's a
people-
place in the world for all different practitioners.
There's absolutely nothing wrong in doing lifestyle here.
In that case, I'll ask another one. What are the key skills required for success in tech PR?
Ooh,
If you can give like 2 each.
I mean, Jinli said the biggest one earlier, right? Curiosity, right? Curiosity. I think that's really key.
Okay, so the standard question I ask whenever I'm interviewing a new staff, right? I always ask this question. Do you know how is it possible that you can surf the internet on your phone? I always ask this question, and
Yeah.
it actually tells a lot.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people don't even know how the internet works.
Mm.
They think that it's magic. Oh yes. It just works. Yeah. I don't know whether it's a tech, actually it's not a tech question, it's actually general knowledge. Right? Most people should kind of know that when you're surfing the internet, first of all, how the signals coming to your phone, right? Yeah. So most staff that I've interviewed actually don't know the answer.
What's the
But I
best?
think,
So,
Yeah.
sorry, beyond the skill, I would say it's just one attribute in my mind. And I tell this to everyone in my team. And we were discussing this earlier. It's just be reliable.
Mm.
It's number one attribute you need to be successful. Be the person who does what they say will do, when they will do, how they will do it. And
Yeah.
that'll take you a very, very long way in life. Don't be the person who says this will be done tomorrow and then have an excuse at 5:45 p.m. Really couldn't do it.
So is lifestyle PR supposed to be more exciting than other forms of PR? I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah.
I think
This PR is just PR, right?
So for me, what was interesting was I was always looking for tech in everything I did. So even with healthcare, when I did healthcare comms, I was looking for a tech narrative, like my brain was just skewed that way. So of all the healthcare comms that we did, the one that was the most interesting to me was diagnostics because it's the closest to tech, right? That's how I discovered that and I think there is a little bit of breaking down how things work. I think tech people who are in tech PR for some reason, I think enjoy that very much. I could tell you really geeky stuff about Lenovo laptops because when I did Lenovo's PR, I just took all of this stuff. I was like, what? Like, really? So small thing, the ThinkPads. They're really quiet machines because a Japanese engineer working in the Yamato labs observed owls flying. And he's like, why don't owls make sound when they flap their wings? Like, why don't they make a sound? And then he studied the aerodynamics of the owl's wings and he replicated that in the fan that's in the ThinkPad. Like, is that not a brilliant story? Like, seriously, that has stayed with me for like 20 years. And when we decided to take these stories of these real world innovations in the ThinkPad, right? All these things that were inspired by nature and stuff, what we did was we got the engineers out here and we did a little tour in Asia. And when the journals walked into the room, the engineers were standing on the ThinkPads, right? $4,000 laptops, right? And they walked in, they're like, and they're looking at these guys and they're like, and then the first thing the engineers did was they picked up the ThinkPads. They're like, are we ready to start? And I'm like, yeah. They picked up the ThinkPads and threw them in buckets of water and collective gasps from all the tech journals kind of going, And then they pulled them out. They just shook them off and booted them right up and did their presentations. Nothing we ever did was more impactful than that. But I'll tell you about a funny tech consumer intersection. Lenovo did a project, a tie-up with Fendi, okay? Where you could, for their consumer machines, I think it was the IdeaPad range at the time. So you could design the skin and basically, so you could design it on their machines, and then the best design would be made into a skin. So we had this design your own baguette like event, right? We of course invited the fashion journals, right? And then we invited these guys because have to lah, it's the tech journals, right?
It's the Vivian Tam one.
No, I was before that, Fendi. So then, and then we said we were taking them out to lunch. We took them to Les Amis, and one of the journals, I'll tell you who it is later, but I won't name him here. He leaned over, he said, Carol, very disappointed. So I said, why? He said, when you said design your own baguette, I was designing my own sandwich. I was very excited. Thinking about all the things I was going to stuff into that sandwich. I'm here sitting eating pretty food and designing like for a handbag. And I was like, oh crap. I'm like, we go Subway after this, okay? Like, you owe me so big time. This is where I was like, this is one of my best memories with these guys. It was so funny.
Can I chime in for lifestyle PR? So I was in Clio magazine 10 years ago, and now that I'm in CNA Lifestyle, the pictures that I receive are still the same pictures that I received a decade ago. So I don't know who is wanting to enter lifestyle PR, but essentially, I feel like people who enter it think it's easy because the product sells itself. It's so exciting. But I'm not excited when I read the press release because I can tell very little thought has gone into it because the product or the person or the profile, whoever it is they're trying to pitch me, is already so interesting on its own. So the PR person doesn't really need to shape the release or whatever. Yeah, so that's the kind of sensing I get when I read like lifestyle releases, or lifestyle PR press releases and all that. For example, like a restaurant, you're launching some new menu, or you're telling me about come for like a media tasting. I just want to know how it's linked to a broader trend. I mean, that's the angle that we're going towards now for like lifestyle pitching. So there was this article I read in like Vulture or I think Grub Street, so part of like New York Magazine, where they talked about how restaurants are moving towards a bit more of a visually appealing menu to cater to all these TikTokers who want to film their meal and all that. So hence the restaurant menu is evolving as tech evolves. And that's the kind of culture, kind of pitch that I want to see from like lifestyle PR. And I don't see that. So people are just saying there's a new restaurant here, or there's a new brand that's launching a new bag. And I'm like, okay, so how does this link to a broader trend of maybe how Gen Z is adapting to like sustainability fashion? Yeah, so it's tying it to a bigger trend, whether it's in lifestyle or tech PR. Yeah, not just hoping that an exciting product sells itself, because then I can just go to the client, right? Why do I need to listen to the PR agents?
And I think that raises a very good point. The media is so time strapped now. We all know that, right? If we're asking them out to events, or if we're asking them to read a press release, or if we're asking them to give that time to speak to an executive, there has to be value for it beyond something they can read on our website or something that we can send them in a fact sheet, So we have to constantly think about delivering that value beyond something they can go find themselves.
Thank you, guys. I think we had a very interesting session with amazing panelists. We really, really appreciate it. We have a little something from the PRCA APAC team for each of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're not able to get to, so please, online folks, just follow up with us after. And for folks who are with us in the room, we're actually really lucky to be at Brown Coleman, the venue sponsor, because they've got a couple of cocktails out for our networking session. So please join us, stick around, and let's have some chat.
Thank you.
Bye, people online.